Taibbi, he had a hearing today with the House subcommittee about the weaponization of the FBI and the Twitter files. We're going to get into that. I listened to the entire hearing. It was very long, but I did it. We'll get through some of it. Like, I'm going to speed through some things because there's some things that are just repetitive. And I was like, I don't need to hear this again. But we're going to get to that. But before we get into the hearing, I do want to highlight there's two parts of this conversation that he had with Bree that I want to talk about because it actually relates to one of the issues that was brought up multiple times during the hearing today. So we're going to get into this issue here of, do you feel that there was bias in reference to the Twitter files, in reference to whether or not it leaned in favor of the GOP or the Democratic Party? That's actually a poll question that I have attached to the live chat. Go ahead and take that poll, or you can wait till we're done with this segment and then take that poll. Do you believe it was intentional? That's what I asked. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion. We're going to kick it off with this, and then we're going to moonwalk our way into the hearing.
I was a corporate attorney for like 6 years.
I know. I've heard you say this is about introducing the evidence, right?
Yeah. So I maybe I should just ask some more pointed questions about what you know about what documents you're actually being given access to, and what kind of document review, like filtration process, has happened prior to your access to the trove that you have access to. Because you've alluded to having access to particular Slack channels, email date ranges, specific email addresses. But in my experience, and again, there's millions and probably billions of dollars devoted to document review technology and document forensics, and thousands of attorneys across the country who spend years of their lives doing exactly this work, which is to have an eagle eye out for what you're being given in a disclosure and be able to see what isn't there and make sure that your opposing counsel is actually being responsive to your document request. And there are these very common tricks of saying, well, are they excluding all emails that are being sent to someone's home address because they're saying, oh, well, that's private, when we know that there's many examples of people emailing work home? Are they excluding a document range? Are they claiming something as privileged when it's not really privileged? And I'm just curious how much you know about what kind of filtration happened before you were given access to what you were given access to.
So I don't know, but you never do. Like, again, in any reporting situation where any source gives you anything, you never know whether you're getting the full deal or not. The only thing you can do is get what you get and then confirm whether it's true or not, and then go from there.
Okay, let me jump in right here for just a second. So that's one of the things that's brought up, and that will be brought up, phrased a little bit differently, but that will be brought up in the hearing that we're going to look at as well. So this is one of the problems that you do run into, I think, for people who are journalists, is that it's true, to Matt's point, is that you honestly never really know for sure if you're getting everything. You may have a source here, a source there. They give you the information that you need. You don't necessarily know what their purpose is. Sometimes you do know why they want to give you this information, but you never really know for sure if you have everything, every single thing. But you go off of what you have, you use your best judgment call, and then you decide whether or not is this newsworthy, right? So I think the point that Matt is trying to make here is that, honestly, it's like this with any story that you cover. You really don't know, even your sources, you don't necessarily know if your sources told you the whole story or not, or if they may have left a couple of things out. So let's go on, because that will be important when we get to the hearing.
Follow up on that thought. I've really focused on things that are in themselves newsworthy. Like, no matter what other context might appear in the Twitter files threads, a request from the Digital Forensic Research Lab of the Atlantic Council for 40,000 people to have their accounts reviewed for being suspected Hindu nationalists. That's newsworthy, no matter what. Like,
of course it is. Of course it is. But there's a world where that's reported on without the editorial claim that there's a broader trend that cannot be proven with only a sliver of information, right? So that you can say this is a newsworthy instance of a anti-right bias, and it's the kind of government interference with speech that we should all be concerned about. And I think that's very legitimate, and it's why, especially over at Rising, we've been covering the Twitter files so favorably this entire time. The only and I don't want there to be a disproportionality here. I have this opportunity to talk to you, and this is like my pet peeve and my little concern. So I'm focusing like the bulk of this conversation on it. But I do really want to validate overwhelmingly how newsworthy and productive and useful I think this information is. I do just have this concern about how we make claims about what the totality of what is going on in Twitter without having more knowledge about what the document provision protocols have been. And so Glenn brought up this point. I brought this up with Glenn when he was on the show a couple months ago, and he, offered some ambivalence about whether or not he would participate because of concerns about what Elon Musk's goals are and what his priorities are that might differ from a journalist's goals. Obviously, this is not like this is nothing nefarious here, but Twitter, Elon Musk is the CEO of this company. He has an interest in preserving its integrity in certain kinds of ways. He has an interest in it being a money-making, profitable institution. He spent $44 billion on it. Obviously, his interest and your interests are not the same. So that being said,
that's always the case. That's every single news story.
That's always
been done.
And Glenn said that as well. But here's where I would push back. Normally, in a whistleblower case, it's not, "Hi, I'm the head of the FBI, and here are some documents I'm giving over to a journalist." It's, "I worked for the FBI. I worked for the NSA. I saw things that I didn't agree with, that disagreed with what higher ups in management wanted me to do, and so I'm leaking stuff that they don't want me to leak." Do you see that as a very different, as a significantly different posture of someone who's working within an organization, who has a difference of interest with the organization, who's telling the public about that, versus someone who's literally in control of the organization, has every interest in profiting from the organization, et cetera, who is volunteering, selectively putting stuff out there for journalists to go through?
So I think this is one of the criticisms I think that some people have had about the Twitter files, is that they feel like, again, you were asked by Elon Musk to do this. So some people have asked, like, what was his motive, right? Like, what's his motive for this? But I think the thing that Matt keeps trying to go back to is that that's the case with any source, though. Sometimes they do have a motive. Like, sometimes it's because, like, for example, I'm working on a story right now where, I have a source, and the reason why that person contacted me is because they were penalized. Sorry, they were penalized. So they gave me some information about a company that heavily penalized them for the wrong reasons. So they want them to pay. So I get that point as well. But I think some people have had that criticism. They said, well, it was Elon Musk that asked you to do it. That's why some people don't trust it. They're like, well, it should have came from someone else. And I'm just like, here's my thing about it. Like, I'm not really trying to look at where it came from. I'm not really trying to look at what has not been revealed yet. And I say yet because this is an ongoing project. What I focused on when I went through the Twitter files, because I covered this heavily on the show, obviously, if you've been with me for a while, you've seen that. We've gone through a lot of them. What I focused on was the information that was revealed and that was presented at that time. And that's what I focused on. And for me, even just focusing on the information that's revealed, whether you're on the left, the right, etc., I took that out. What I took in was the fact that it is very problematic and very concerning that you have these government agencies that were basically had their hand in Twitter's back pocket and they were telling Twitter what they could and could not do. And for me, that's kind of all the information I need. And I think that's the difference. Like, some people are like, where's the information about people on the left? Where's the information about this? Who did you get the information from? And for me, I'm just like, this is the information that was presented. And the information that was revealed, it is problematic. It's problematic that you have government agencies that actually are using their power to do something like that in the first place. So for me, it wasn't even about Trump. It wasn't about Elon Musk. It was none of that. It was just about the fact that these government agencies had overreach, and they were using it in such a way to censor people, to censor accounts on Twitter. And based on what I've read from the Twitter files, did not deserve to be censored. Let's go on, because there's another question here I got to get to as well.
Isn't that a different scenario?
Yes, but every source has motives. Every source that you ever work with has motives, and you're always making a calculation every time you do any kind of report. Now, I've done probably a dozen whistleblower stories. They're all different. The sources all have different motivations. Some of them are noble, like they do things because morally they can't get behind whatever it is that's going on at the company or in the government. Sometimes people are just bitter because they've been passed over for a promotion or for money or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, though. Ultimately, please let me finish.
Sure.
Ultimately, you're always weighing that versus whatever the newsworthiness is of what you're looking at and what you're hearing about. And you get the stuff, and then you try to confirm whether it's true or not. And then as soon as you make that determination, that's when you go forward. I mean, like, if I had any belief that there was some hidden trove of communications where there was this massive campaign against left-leaning people that I was somehow missing, that there were, lists from the FBI that were targeting Democrats, for instance, like that were being passed to people like the lawyer Stasha Cardiel or Yoel Roth or whatever it was. If I thought for a second that there was a realistic chance of that being the case, yeah, of course I would stop doing this story. But there's no evidence of that. It would be so hard to pull off something like that without that being detected in the documents.
I want to point out too, because this is another thing that comes up when we get to the hearing, is that I want to remind everyone that Matt Taibbi is a liberal. He describes himself as an old school liberal. And I want to remind everyone that Elon Musk has said this on multiple interviews, that he's always voted Democrat. Now, why is that important? Because for the people saying that, oh, they purposely did this just to attack Democrats, I'm like, but they are Democrats. So it's just, I'm going to get to the second point here, which I think is, give me just a second. Can you go ahead and cue up the second timestamp, Eric? We'll get to that point too, because that's another thing that is brought up during the hearing, is this idea that it seems like all the attacks were about the Democratic Party and not about the Republican Party. And, there were some things that were said also about how left-wing accounts were also censored. And I'll get to that in just a second, but let's go ahead and cue this up here. This is the second point that I want to mention.
So if I start wasting searches on trying to find whether or not Donald Trump, in a fit of pique one night, called up and asked something about Chrissy Teigen, rather than doing what I did do, which is search every communication that I could find with Elvis Chan and every other FBI agent whose email address that I could find, and immediately focus on that and try immediately to get to the bigger story. This is how the process works. I'm trying to get to the bigger thing as quickly as I can. I'm not going to worry about Donald Trump's stupid request just because idiots at the New York Times and the Washington Post are going to whine about it if I don't.
So I also wouldn't be prioritizing
let's chime in here for just a second. So this piece here where he says he's trying to get the story out as quickly as possible. You want to know why that's really important? Because every now and then, sometimes you have information, you have a source, and you've already written what you needed to write. And then literally like the day before, your source can contact you and say, don't publish that. Don't print that. When I used to write for the newspaper, when I used to write in school, that used to happen. That would happen. And it sucks because you spend all this time doing the research and everything's like, okay, I got the information. Let me just boom and go with it. You do want to get it out as quickly as possible, especially if it's a story that is newsworthy. You want to, I hate to say it, but you want to strike the iron while it's hot. You really want to get it out there, especially if it's a topic that's trending in any type of way. But that point is very important. Like he got the information that he got. I know he looked through thousands of emails. He talks about this in the hearing. And then he said, okay, time for me to move forward with this. Let's get this out as quickly as possible. And one of the conditions with the Twitter files was that it had to be released on Twitter. And then later on, Matt Taibbi will write about it on his Substack, but that was one of the conditions, that it had to be released on his Twitter. So there were certain rules that he had to, abide by. I don't know if I necessarily, like if I was Elon Musk per se, would I have made that rule? Probably not, but this is the job that he took, and that was the rule that was made there.
Donald Trump's request. But I think that's such an important, this is such an important acknowledgement here. It's useful for the public to know. I'm very interested to know that you feel like there is a limited number of requests you can make. And you don't know how many, but that you have to make internally, you have to prioritize searches, that there's not some sense that you can kind of comprehensively look forever, that you have to rank internally your own priorities, which obviously is your prerogative, and your priorities are yours and my priorities are mine. But what that does is it's an artificially imposed limitation that I think prevents anyone from making claims about what a full search in its entirety would actually yield, right? So for me, I also wouldn't be prioritizing Trump. If I'm going to be fully honest, my first search words would be Bernie, socialism, Bernie Bro. I would like go through all of my Twitter people who I know have claimed to be shadow banned and blocked and had their accounts taken down over.
So I think Matt Taibbi has had this question a couple of times on different interviews. Here are some of the things he did say he looked for. He did look for Julian Assange. So that was another one that came up. He did say he looked for issues with Palestinian, pro-Palestine accounts, so to speak. Another one, I believe he said he did find that there was suppression when it came to the World Socialist website and also the Yellow Vest in France. So those are, again, our left, organizations. I don't think that Matt Taibbi was probably looking for Bernie Sanders per se. I think he was looking for issues, or some of the things he said he found was like 2016, some going back to 2019. I think he was looking for issues where, technically these government agencies intervened and played their hand in a way that they shouldn't have. And so maybe for Matt, maybe something like Bernie Sanders was not, maybe he did not consider that to be priority. I don't know. Like for him, he probably was just like, meh, because we all know that. I think he probably thought to himself, like, we all know what happened to Bernie Sanders. We know they played him. We know they cheated him. Like, we all know those things. So he probably didn't feel like that was something that he needed to look for. So that's probably why you didn't see that information. I'll play a little bit more of this and we'll get to the hearing.
Years. And I would look for requests for Hillary Clinton and some of the Podesta file disclosures about what journalists they thought were friendly and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I would be searching for, because that's my priority. I'm not saying it's the most important thing in the world. I'm not saying it's more important than what you've been searching about in terms of FBI interference. It probably is not. So I acknowledge that. I accept that. I have no problem with that. But it needs to be, I think, foregrounded. That this is not a comprehensive search, that I'm not looking through everything, that I don't have the ability to look through it because, frankly, I'm being limited, not necessarily nefariously. I'm not saying it's because of Elon Musk, I don't know
that I'm being limited.
But you just told us that you're being limited, that you feel like you can't ultimately make an unlimited number of search requests.
I'm being judicious about what I ask for. Let's put it that way.
But why? Because you feel like there's only so many requests that you can make?
Maybe. You never know. I don't know. I don't know. This is. I don't own the company. I don't control this situation.
So were you told that it's very expensive and difficult to do these requests? So don't. This isn't a bonanza. This isn't a free for all.
No, but I've been doing this job for a long time, and I know that things change with sources, and you never know what the situation is going to be tomorrow. You have to act as quickly as you can to get the story that you can as fast as you can.
Okay, and let's go ahead and leave that there, and let's get into the hearing. Now, I'm going to start right at the beginning of Matt Taibbi's opening statement, which I thought was pretty powerful. They did their best to try to smear him and Michael Shellenberger. I'm sorry, Michael, I forgot to put you on the thumbnail as well, because when I made that thumbnail, I was like, I thought about it after the fact and it was already done and it was too late. And then you got to go back and change everything else. And I was like, crap, I forgot to put Michael on there. But Michael Shellenberger was also present. You're going to hear from both of them. But Matt Taibbi's opening statement, I think, was very powerful, especially since some of these representatives tried to call them so-called journalists. I'm like, give me a break. So we had to let them know who he really is. He had to let him know, let me tell you who I really am.
The First Amendment and an American population accustomed to the right to speak is the best defense left against the censorship industrial complex. If the latter can knock over our first and most important constitutional guarantee, these groups will have no serious opponent left anywhere. If there's anything the Twitter files show, it's that we're in danger of losing this most precious right, without which all democratic rights are impossible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you.
Whoops. I'm sorry, guys. I think I started that a little too late, because I was about to say that is definitely not the beginning. Okay, there's Michael. There's the end of Michael's speech. Okay, sorry. You really need to hear this. This is important.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, members of the Select Committee, thank you for having me today. My name is Matt Taibbi. I've been a reporter for 30 years and a staunch advocate of the First Amendment. Much of that time was spent at Rolling Stone magazine. Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers.
That was her trying to talk to people and say, what? You guys didn't tell me this.
I'm now the editor of the online magazine Racket on the independent platform Substack. I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. To say these attracted intense public interest would be an understatement. My computer looked like a Vegas slot machine, as just the first tweet about the blockage of the Hunter Biden laptop story registered 143 million impressions and 30 million engagements. But it wasn't until a week after the first report, after Michael Shellenberger, Barry Weiss, and other researchers joined the search of the files, that we started to grasp the significance of this story. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We saw the first hints in communications between Twitter executives before the 2020 election, when we read things like "flagged by DHS" or "please see attached report from FBI for potential misinformation." This would be attached to an Excel spreadsheet with a long list of names whose accounts were often suspended shortly after. Again, Ranking Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right. The people affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truthout, the leftist South American channel Telesur, the Yellow Vest movement, that in fact is a key point of the Twitter files. That is.
See, I just wanted to make sure you heard that part right there. There were left accounts that were also affected as well that he did mention.
It's neither a left nor right issue. Following the trail of communications between Twitter and the federal government across tens of thousands of emails led to a series of revelations. Mr. Chairman, we summarized and submitted them to the committee in the form of a new Twitter files thread, which was also released to the public this morning. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing, including Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and many others, many taxpayer-funded. A focus of this fast-growing network, as Mike noted, is making lists of people whose opinions, beliefs, associations, or sympathies are deemed misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation. That last term is just a euphemism for true but inconvenient. Undeniably, the making of such lists is a form of digital McCarthyism. Ordinary Americans are not just being reported to Twitter for de-amplification or deplatforming, but to firms like PayPal, digital advertisers like Xandr, and crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe. These companies can and do refuse service to law-abiding people and businesses whose only crime is falling afoul of a distant, faceless, unaccountable, algorithmic judge. As someone who grew up a traditional ACLU liberal, this mechanism for punishment and deprivation without due process is horrifying. Another troubling aspect is the role of the press, which should be the people's last line of defense in such cases. But instead of investigating these groups, journalists partnered with them. If Twitter declined to remove an account right away, government agencies and NGOs would call reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets, who in turn would call Twitter demanding to know why action had not yet been taken. Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system. I'm running out of time, so I'll just sum up and say, it's just not possible to instantly arrive at truth. It is, however, possible, becoming technologically possible to instantly define and enforce a political consensus online, which I believe is what we're looking at. This is a grave threat to people of all political persuasions. The First Amendment and an American population accustomed to the right to speak is the best defense left against the censorship industrial complex. If the latter can knock over our first and most important constitutional guarantee, these groups will have no serious opponent left anywhere. If there's anything the Twitter files show, it's that we're in danger of losing this most precious right, without which all democratic rights are impossible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, that's part of his opening statement. He was running short on time. So if you want to see the full statement, go onto his Substack because he has that written there. I think it may also be on Twitter too. I have to go back on there and check. But definitely check out that full statement. We're going to get to some of the questioning because it's very revealing here what you were going to see. How the Democratic Party, which was supposed to be the party that would champion anti-censorship, how they have moved further to the right. So you're going to see them. They're going to be a lot harder on Matt Taibbi and Michael Shellenberger. And then you're going to see the Republican Party make this claim that you're on the left. I thought you were supposed to be for, anti-censorship. So it's a revealing moment here. It really is. And this is the thing that I hate about partisan politics, because again, people are going to look out for their party. So had it been the other way around, it probably would have been the Republicans giving Matt Taibbi the third degree. But let's go ahead and get into the first line of questioning. And that's what I like to call it, because that's kind of what it is. We'll go to the gentleman here. Here we go.
Democratic rights are impossible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Taibbi. We appreciate both of your opening statements. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes of question.
Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. It is not surprising that the minority is already attacking you in its opening statement. We apologize to both of you. You shouldn't be treated that way. Some of the defenders of big tech and the Biden administration, as we know, have worked very hard to cast doubts on the legitimacy of your reporting, and some have gone so far to state it's irrelevant if Twitter was suppressing speech in coordination with the federal government. But this morning, we saw a stunning display of their attack of your character. We shouldn't be surprised. This is what the defenders of big government corruption do. This is the playbook. They destroy the messenger. We just saw it here on live television, and everybody can see it for themselves. And the whistleblowers, of course, as well. Look, this is...
Yeah, let's make something very clear here. It's not like Matt Taibbi wrote these things himself. Like, he didn't write the emails. And I feel like people were more upset at him because he's the one that delivered the information instead of being upset at the people who actually wrote the emails damning Twitter. Like, that's the part that's really frustrating to me, I think, is like, you guys are mad at the messenger. Very strange, very odd behavior.
What we know, what you've documented carefully in the Twitter files are a couple of key facts. People will hear a lot of things today, but this is what they need to know. The federal government, from Democrat members of Congress to intelligence agencies, including the FBI, used Twitter and other social media companies to censor Americans' speech. If the alarm bells are not going off, then you're not paying attention. Over the past 3 years, documents show, they prove what you guys have uncovered here. There's communication between Twitter and the FBI. It was constant, it was pervasive. Twitter was basically an FBI subsidiary before Elon Musk took it over. The Twitter files revealed that by 2020, Twitter was engaged in open information sharing with the intelligence community, and now we know there were many intelligence agencies apparently involved in this. The FBI pressured Twitter to act on election-related tweets leading up to the 2022 election. Of course, they did it in 2020 as well, and Twitter dutifully censored content as a result. Twitter executives restricted accounts. They censored speech that conflicted with the left's narrative. Twitter has used its internal tools to control and manipulate speech considered misinformation, and who was determining that? It was the government bureaucrats. Documents show that Twitter used visibility filtering to restrict certain accounts and posts and removed people from the platform altogether.
Yes, and I see Rome's comment here, and I want to highlight this. Rome said Twitter files left out a lot of the left for real. I got my Twitter taken down when I made a video to Biden saying we're not black if we don't vote for him. It was just me looking in the mirror, no words. Yeah, there's been a lot of people I know that have, you know, Twitter has definitely come after them and suppressed them. It's unfortunate. Shout out to Rome there in the chat, but it's been, that's why I'm saying, like, I do know there are some leftist accounts that have been heavily suppressed on Twitter, like to the point where people will actually post a tweet that says, can anybody see this? Do you guys see me here? I just want to know if I'm showing up. You know, so yeah, it's definitely been an issue.
Twitter files should be a matter of bipartisan concern for every member of Congress and every American citizen, because it is a bedrock principle of our constitutional system that the government does not get to decide what speech is acceptable or true. Under the First Amendment, Americans have a right to speak freely, regardless of whether their speech upsets the preferred narrative. In fact, that's when it needs the most vigorous protection. Everybody on the left used to believe in that, or at least they purported to. Government and media fact checkers frequently get things wrong. The American people can't and shouldn't rely on so-called experts to be the arbiters of truth, disinformation boards and the like. It doesn't matter what political party you're in, government should not suppress important debates in public discourse. Gentlemen, let me start with Mr. Taibbi. You have a long award-winning journalist career. You just highlighted here decades of experience reporting on some of the most complex and important issues of our time. Where do you rate your reporting on the Twitter files among your whole body of work throughout your career? How serious is this?
Well, first of all, Mr. Congressman, thank you for the question. I would say, you know, I spent 10 years covering the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. That was obviously a very serious issue, but this Twitter file story and what we're looking at now and what we're investigating now, I don't think there's any comparison. This is by far the most serious thing.
And I want to point out something here in reference to his 2008 financial crisis coverage. What you have to remember is most of the people that were implicated in that book were Democrats. But nobody had a problem with Matt Taibbi calling out Democrats back then. And that just goes to show you how much more politically divided the country is right now. Now, all of a sudden, people are mad, like, how dare he go after the Democrats working for the world's richest man, who's not the richest man anymore in the world. But how dare he do that? And all of the liberal commentators had the same PR talking point. They just pasted on one after another. You literally see a string of tweets with the exact same wording. So they got the PR message there. But nobody seemed to have a problem with him back then when he called out those Democrats. Now, all of a sudden, people have a problem.
That I've ever looked at, and it's certainly the most grave story that I've ever worked on personally.
I want to ask you both the same question, and that is, first of all, has anyone from the federal government contacted you during the course of this investigation or since you've reported on the Twitter files? And number two, who do you think are the most egregious federal government agencies involved in this censorship exercise? Let me start with Mr. Schellenberger.
Thank you, Congressman. I have not been contacted. Thank you, Congressman. I have not been contacted by anybody in the Biden administration relating to this topic. And I would like to echo what Matt just said. I've never worked on an issue where so frequently while doing it, I just had chills go up my spine because of what I was seeing happening. I never thought in my own country that freedom of speech would be threatened in this way. And it's just frightening when you get into it. The most recent, our most recent discoveries, I mean, I think you understand the process, is that we first raised a bunch of concerns around the way Twitter pre-Elon Musk was censoring people and creating blacklists. Very quickly, we discovered that we had FBI agents basically and other government officials, demanding that Twitter take certain actions. We now know that the Department of Homeland Services, which has had, what's that? Security, sorry, Department of Homeland Security, had to try to create a disinformation board. That went away after public backlash, but we now realize that they have this other enterprise and they've been building out basically mechanisms to proliferate a censorship industrial complex around the country to censor on a whole range of issues. And so you've...
Okay, sorry, for the sake of time, I am going to fast forward to. So as you can imagine, that was a Republican representative. Now we're going to move on to one of my representatives from Massachusetts, and you're going to see how the questioning changes.
Mr. Taibbi, in 2019, Special Counsel Robert Mueller unequivocally found that the Internet Research Agency, owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the same oligarch who runs the Wagner Group, carried out an extensive social media disinformation campaign to help then-candidate Donald Trump and to hurt Hillary Clinton. He also found that the Russian intelligence interfered with the 2016 election via a hack and release campaign, damaging to the Clinton campaign. These particular findings came on the heels of the unanimous assessment on the part of United States 18 intelligence agencies that Russian President Putin, quote, ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the presidential election, close quote. They also followed the release of a bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report finding that Russia and Vladimir Putin engaged in, I quote, aggressive, multifaceted effort to influence the U.S. president election.
You see, he's bringing up Russiagate again. They're still talking about this, you guys.
So, Mr. Taibbi, do you believe that the Russians and their oligarch-controlled Internet Research Agency interfered in the 2016 election via this social media disinformation campaign? Do you believe that?
Mr. Congressman, my disagreement with the issue is...
I think this is basically a yes or no question.
You ass. That guy, listen, when I was listening to this morning, I was just like, what an ass. You didn't have to say it like that. I think that this is basically a yes or no question. And you're going to hear that from a couple of other people. They're going to be assholes like that. You calling someone, let them answer the question.
Either you think so or you don't, and I don't have a lot of time, so.
Okay, well then I'm going to answer not in the sense that you're putting it.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
all countries
All right.
engage in offensive information operations. The question is scale.
Do you believe that
the
Russia
Twitter
engaged
files
in a hacking, reclaiming my time? This is how it works now. I'll ask the questions and you try to provide an answer if you can.
Now he's going to be condescending. You see, this happens throughout the hearings, as if he's saying this as if Matt Taibbi doesn't understand like how this process works. Like, I'm sorry, he was still talking. You cut him off. You didn't let him finish what he's saying. He's like, I'm going to yield back my time now. That's how this works. What you guys have to understand is a lot of these congressmen and women that are a part of this committee, these are people that most likely were former lawyers. So they know how to ask questions in such a way where they can just cut you off and then continue talking. What a prick. He's from my state, Massachusetts. What a jerk.
You have to allow him to answer.
Do you
sir.
believe?
The gentleman is out of order and should not be interrupting a member asking a question on our side, Mr. Chairman.
Reclaiming my time from everyone. Do you believe that Russia engaged in a hack and release campaign damaging to the Clinton campaign back in 2016? Again,
I don't know, and I would say it's irrelevant.
All right, let me ask Mr. Schellenberg. These are pretty easy questions. That's just whether you believe it or not.
Condescending again. These are easy questions, whether you believe it or not. What a condescending, you know, when someone says masshole, I live here in Massachusetts, when someone says, oh, so-and-so, you guys are massholes, that right there, what you just see from him, that is pretty much a definition of a masshole. He's being a jerk on purpose. Aye. So he goes on to Schellenberger. Okay, let me see.
Influencing.
I understand.
Also, that material was true.
Yeah.
Look, let me introduce a couple of documents just to reinforce that we've got.
That is not a legitimate predicate for censorship.
Unanimous reclaiming my time.
Sure.
Gentleman's out of order. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask unanimous consent to enter the indictment in the United States versus the Internet Research Agency, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, number 1-18-32. And I'll also ask to enter into the record the executive summary to Volume 1 of the Mueller report, which states, in March 2016, the GRU began hacking, this is the Russian agency, began hacking the email accounts of the Clinton campaign, volunteers and employees, including campaign chairman John Podesta. The GRU later released additional materials through the organization WikiLeaks. The presidential campaign of Donald Trump showed interest in WikiLeaks releases of the documents and welcomed their potential damage to candidate Clinton. So I've introduced these documents.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've introduced these documents because it's clear to me that Russia's use of social media to interfere in the 2016 election created abundant abundant reason.
Okay, I think.
Wasn't Russiagate debunked? Like, why is he still talking about this? Out of everything that has been released from the Twitter files, this is what you choose to bring up?
Social media platforms to be concerned.
Gentleman's time has expired. Without objection, these documents are entered into the record. We now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to continue along, in a sense, the line we've been on just now. Mr. Taibbi, Mr. Schellenberger, I'll ask both of you. Is it fair to say Russia is a bad actor who is trying to do everything they can to undermine confidence in the United States government and in our form of democracy?
Look at how he phrased the question. Is it fair to say that Russia is bad? See, they phrase the question in such a way. It's like, if you say yes, you look bad. If you say no, you look bad, based on if you were involved in releasing these Twitter files or not. So listen to how he framed the question. He's trying to get them to admit that Russia is bad. And if you say no, then you look bad in the eyes of the Democrats, a part of the subcommittee. They're like, oh, then the next thing you know, they'll start saying you're a Putin puppet. If you say yes, then you look bad to the people who supported and advocated for the Twitter file. You see how look at how they phrase the question. That's very important, you guys.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with the organization in Europe, the Global
I wouldn't have said that, Matt. I wouldn't have said that one on that one.
Engagement Center?
Yes.
Well, it's an American.
State Department, I'm sorry. But are you familiar with the Global Engagement Center's use of European and other sources to in fact, determine where Twitter files should or shouldn't be, if you will, taken down thousands of names and Twitter files, correct?
I'm not sure that GEC, Global Engagement Center is taking down Twitter files. I actually wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry.
Well, Twitter and the FBI have used this organization and their funding. Well, let me go on to another. Stay on the path I was on. You commented that the scale mattered. Okay, would you elaborate on scale mattering in the attempt to undermine free speech?
Absolutely. If I could take this. Yeah, so a great example of this is a report that
I'm sorry. I want to point out Matt Taibbi showed up with 2 bottles of water because he knew this was going to be a long session.
Global Engagement Center sent to Twitter and to members of the media and other platforms about what they called the pillars of Russian disinformation. Now, part of this report is what you would call, I think you would call traditional, hardcore intelligence gathering, where they made a reasoned, evidence-based case that certain sites were linked to Russian influence or linked to the Russian government. In addition to that, however, they also said that sites that, quote, generate their own momentum and have opinions that are in line with those accounts are part of a propaganda ecosystem. Now, this is just another word for guilt by association.
Yep.
And this is the problem with the whole idea of trying to identify which accounts are actually the Internet Research Agency and which ones are just people who followed those accounts or retweeted them. Twitter initially did not find more than a handful of IRA accounts. It wasn't until they got into an argument with the Senate Select Intelligence Committee that they came back with a different answer.
Okay, so scale matters.
Yeah, so I want to mention something here. We did talk about that with the Twitter files. It's like some of the accounts that government agencies requested Twitter remove, they weren't, it was just because they retweeted something from an account that these government agencies felt were problematic. So some of them, it was just a simple retweet or a like. I liked that tweet. Like, yeah, so it was very problematic. So basically those government agencies got out of control. I do want to go ahead and head towards Debbie Weiserman Schultz because she's another one that's going to upset you quite a bit. She is not a nice person. She was actually part of the DNC when Hillary was running in 2016. Like she's a piece of work, and you're going to see it in this interrogation right here.
Really? You wouldn't agree that a journalist should avoid spoon-fed, cherry-picked information if it's likely to be slanted, incomplete, or designed to reach a foregone, easily disputed, or invalid conclusion?
Mrs. Congresswoman, I've done probably a dozen stories involving whistleblowers. Every reported story that I've ever done across 3 decades involves sources who have motives. Every time you do a story, you're making a balancing test between the public interest.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I ask you this because before you became Elon Musk's hand-picked journalist,
She's so rude. You see how rude she was? You know, when I look at Debbie Weiserman Schultz, like I look at her face, and to me, she just looks like someone who is not genuinely happy. Like I look like when she wakes up in the morning, and it just looks like, and I'm not trying to be mean, but she does not look like a happy person. She just looks like, you know, she's got, what's the phrase? Resting bitch face. That's what it is. That's what she looks like to me. It's just like she just does not look like a happy person. I don't know what's happening.
And pardon the oxymoron. You stated this on Joe Rogan's podcast about being spoon-fed information, and I quote, "I think that's true of any kind of journalism," and you'll see it behind me here. "I think that's true of any kind of journalism. Once you start getting handed things, then you've lost. They have you at that point, and you got to get out of that habit. You just can't cross that line."
Yes, believe it or not, guys, they brought Joe Rogan into this. When I was listening to this earlier today, I was like, I know they did not bring Joe Rogan into this conversation. Aye.
Do you still believe what you told Mr. Rogan? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
I laughed.
Good. Now, you crossed that line with the Twitter files.
No.
Elon Musk, it's my time. Please do not interrupt me. Elon Musk spoon-fed you his cherry-picked information, which you must have suspected promotes a slanted viewpoint, or at the very least generates another right-wing conspiracy theory. You violated your own standard, and you appear to have benefited from it. Before the release of the emails in August of last year, you had 661,000 Twitter followers. After the Twitter files, your followers doubled, and now it's 3 times what it was last August.
So what? Well, so what? Are you jealous here, Debbie, because his Twitter followers increased? This is ridiculous to me. I don't feel like this is relevant. I really don't. Matt Taibbi has a lot of patience because there's no way I could have sat through all of this.
I imagine your Substack readership, which is a subscription, increased significantly because of the work that you did for Elon Musk. Now, I'm not asking you to put a dollar figure on it, but it's quite obvious that you've profited from the Twitter files. You hit the jackpot on that Vegas slot machine to which you referred. That's true, isn't it?
Why is she acting like Matt Taibbi just became a journalist yesterday? He's written multiple books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. Why is she acting like he just became known yesterday? That's what's hilarious to me. You hit the jackpot, didn't you? Should we talk about your fun? See, this is why I couldn't be sitting there. This is why I could not sit there and have this line of questioning, because I would have snapped back and said something like, should we talk about your funds, Debbie? Should we talk about your campaign funds? Where you getting your money from? How you support the military industrial complex? Should we talk about that, Deb? Your Substack viewership increase. So what? You want a Substack, Debbie? You want to write, Debbie? Go sign up for Substack and start writing. You sound jealous.
Also reinvested.
You've made some. No. Is it true that you have profited since you were the recipient of the Twitter files? You've made money. Yes or no?
I think it's probably a wash, honestly.
No, you have made money that you did not have before, correct?
I think the reason why he said it was probably a wash is because, remember, Matt mentioned he was traveling back and forth from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I believe he was paying for that on his own. Remember, he was talking about this earlier, right? This woman is not a happy person. She's just not. Like, it's just yikes. When I heard this morning, I'm like, who pissed in your cornflakes? Okay. So my whole thing is that I feel like, again, this is irrelevant. This is irrelevant to the information that was reported. Journalists are supposed to get paid. Do you work for free, Debbie? No, you don't. Ridiculous. How dare you get paid for doing your job?
But I've also spent money that I didn't have before. I just hired a whole group of people to
patently obvious answer, reclaiming my time. Attention is a powerful drug. Eyeballs, money, prominence, attention, all of it points to problems with accuracy and credibility. And the larger point, which is social media companies are not biased against conservatives, and if anything, they ignored their own policies by allowing Trump and other MAGA extremists to post incessant lies, endangering public safety and even our democracy.
They kicked Trump off the platform, though, Debbie. Are you going to mention that part? No, you're not. They removed him from the platform.
Hypocrisy is the hangover of an addiction to attention. Now, I want to point out another alleged finding from the Twitter files. Mr. Schellenberger, you've referenced several times this $3.4 million that the FBI paid to Twitter in 2020. that was referenced in General Counsel Jim Baker's email. I first want to confirm that nowhere in the email does Baker say that the money was paid to censor information, take down posts, suspend accounts, or do anything relating to content moderation. Is that correct?
It is.
Thank you. But honest reporting would have explained that the $3.4 million was paid to release information, not censor it. One of my colleagues on this panel repeated your distortions and told Americans this reimbursement was used to, quote, censor certain stories. That's a flat-out lie. Mr. Schellenberger, are you aware of Section 2706 under the Stored Communications Act? It says when social media companies comply with subpoenas, warrants, or court orders, it costs them money, so they get reimbursed. The FBI makes these requests and reimbursements to discover evidence and run relevant to a criminal investigation. Let me repeat that. The FBI makes these requests to help catch the bad guys. That helps keep child predators off social media sites. It helps keep violent criminals off our streets. I support the FBI and our law enforcement agencies. It would be nice if our Republican colleagues did the same and not fabricate explanations for payments that are defined for clear purposes in.
Of course you support the FBI. Of course she does. Let's stop pretending like the FBI is out here all the time trying to find like serial killers, you know, like you see these shows like CSI and all that kind of stuff. Let's stop pretending that they're spending a lot of their time doing that, because they had a whole hell of a lot of time to try to police Twitter executives and tell them what they can and cannot have on their own platform. So let's stop, Debbie. I, for one, support the FBI. Of course you do. Of course you do. You're corporate and corrupt. Jesus. I think Debbie's still mad that Hillary lost.
Federal law. My time is just about wrapped up.
May I respond?
The truth is that social media companies are unregulated monoliths. They pose danger to individuals. They allow posts that bring harm, and that's the bottom line. That the other side will not tell you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Generally had no time to yield.
Nothing positive for me to say about the FBI. Thank you so much for that, JB. They're busy going after people like Dr. King and Fred Hampton. Exactly. And it was just revealed, we talked about this a couple of days ago, that they finally announced that it was the FBI along with the CIA and the NYPD that killed Malcolm X. So no, let's stop pretending like the FBI is this great organization, this great agency. Get out of here. Let's move on to who's next. Oh yeah, this guy with the glasses. Right here.
Comfortable. He said that I, who had always gotten the secrets, was being handed the secrets. Look, again, I've done lots of whistleblower stories. There's always a balancing test that you make when you're given material, and you're always balancing newsworthiness versus the motives of your sources. In this case, the newsworthiness clearly outweighed any other considerations, and I think everybody else who worked on the project agreed.
Doesn't it seem like any reporter who breaks a blockbuster story is going to get attention, and there may be even financial consequences that follow? It seems like as surely as the night follows the day, that's the case, right?
That is true, although I would like to clear up, some things that have been misrepresented. Not one of us has actually been paid to do any of this work. We've all,
Oh, drop the mic. Mic drop moment. See, if they actually did their research, because I've seen other interviews that Matt Taibbi did where he was asked that question and he said that we weren't paid to do this. There's other things that are going to come up too where you see they didn't do their research as well. Wait for it.
Traveled on our own. We've hired our personnel on our own, and I've just hired a pretty large team to investigate this issue out of my own pocket.
The fact that the attempt comes from the dais across the aisle to smear you, frankly, I think liberals, if I understand that, in your background, you're both good liberals, and you come in and the Democrats' hostility to what you've undertaken is astonishing to behold, but it's part of the picture we're seeing. In Twitter...
What's a good liberal? What's a good liberal compared to a bad liberal?
Files number 15, Mr. Taibbi, you exposed Hamilton 68, a website associated with the German Marshall Fund that purported in a dashboard to identify Russian bot networks and became ubiquitously cited by media to identify media stories or narratives that supposedly flowed from Russia. From Russia! You showed that the front man for Hamilton 68 was Clint Watts, a former FBI agent. At Twitter, the trust and safety executives were ridiculing Hamilton 68 for the ludicrous identifications that it was making, which they could reverse engineer and figure out who those accounts were. And then in Twitter files number 17, after disclosing Mr. Watts' identity, you disclosed that J.M. Berger is the creator of Hamilton 68. And guess what? He was a federal contractor, right?
He was, yes. He denies that he worked on it for the Global Engagement Center, but he was an employee of theirs until about a month before the dashboard's release.
Just a month before it, he said, I believe publicly, that the dashboard was the product of 3 years' work. So doesn't it beg sort of the intriguing question whether the creation of this fraudulent Hamilton 68 dashboard was effectively underwritten by government funding?
Yes, I think that's a good question. Certainly the German Marshall Fund, which is the NGO that is at the top of the chain in this organization. It's the German Marshall Fund, then the Alliance for Securing Democracy, and then Hamilton 68. They're a federal contractor. They received over $1 million from the Department of Defense. They're the board of the Alliance for Securing Democracy, has a former acting head of the CIA, a former deputy head of the NSA, a former chief of the DHS on it. So
I want to make, and the bigger point is hard because the examples sometimes start making it. I want to introduce you to, or introduce the country to somebody else. I think you've mentioned it in one of your writings, Richard Stengel. You know who that is?
Yes, he's the former, the first head of the Global Engagement Center.
Notice he said, I think you mentioned it in one of your writings. I see somebody did their research.
American people to hear from him for 30 seconds.
Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population.
Every country does it. Every country does propaganda, and they have to do it to their own people, is what Mr. Stengel said. If I understand correctly, he was the head of the Global Engagement Center at its creation, right?
He was, and in his book, Information Wars, there are a number of passages where he talks about creating a whole of government solution to the information problem. He hastened to say that he didn't want to create a quote information ministry, but what he was describing roughly approximates that.
In the half minute I've got left, he also was associated with Hamilton 68, right?
The Global Engagement Center certainly had ties to Hamilton 68.
I think it's closer than that. Well, that'll come out.
Okay.
This guy did his homework, okay? This guy looked up every damn thing.
Well, I'd be anxious to hear that.
I hope I'll get yielded in a minute or two from somebody else down the way. There's all sorts of stuff to disclose. This committee has to uncover not that single instance, but this system that you have described. This is the hope that Americans have to set this right. This committee, and that hostility shows what we're up against. It's not 3 pillars to the system, it is 4. And you're seeing the left move to crush you and anybody else who tries to expose this. I yield.
I thank the gentleman for his great.
Oh, snap. Let's go to the next. Who are we going to next? That guy took too long to get his point across. Oh, yeah. Let's go to the Jim Jordan part. And then we'll have to go to the woman who doesn't know what Substack is. We'll get to that too.
Didn't vote for. I mean, like, this is about protecting the First Amendment. Mr. Taibbi, I want to read from your Twitter file number 9. You say this: after weeks of Twitter files, the Bureau issued a statement Wednesday, referring to the FBI. Here's what the FBI said: it is unfortunate that conspiracy theorists and others are feeding the American public misinformation with the sole purpose of attempting to discredit the agency. You then follow up, and this is why I think you're an award-winning author, you then follow up, they must think we're unambitious if our sole aim is to discredit the FBI. After all, a whole range of government agencies discredit themselves in the Twitter files. And then you go on to, in this particular Twitter file, to talk about what Mr. Bishop was just talking about, the GEC at the State Department. You talk about the CIA. You talk about the DOD. You talk about the FBI. You talk about the DHS. You talk about the Foreign Intelligence Task Force, which is a combination of all these. But there was one agency you didn't mention, because you didn't know at the time. One agency, you got almost the whole alphabet, but you didn't mention one agency.
FTC.
FTC.
Yeah.
That
came out. I saw that this morning, actually.
You know about them now.
Yes, we
You know about them now in an up close and personal way. You didn't know then, but you do know now. December 2nd, as I said earlier, December 2nd, the first Twitter file comes out, Mr. Taibbi. And I think there are 5 others, including the ones from Mr. Schellenberger. December 13th, the very first letter that the FTC sends to Twitter after the Twitter files, 11 days after the first Twitter file. There have been 5 of them come out. The FTC's first demand in that first letter after the Twitter files come out is identify all journalists, I'm quoting, identify all journalists and other members of the media to whom Twitter worked with. You find that scary, Mr. Taibbi, that you got a federal government agency asking a private company, who in the press are you talking with?
Yeah, I do find it scary. I think it's none of the government's business which journalists a private company talks to and why. I think every journalist should be concerned about that, and the absence of interest in that issue by my fellow colleagues in the mainstream media is an indication of how low the business has sunk. There was once a real esprit de corps and camaraderie within media. Whenever one of us was gone after, we all kind of rose to the challenge and supported.
Used to be.
Yeah.
Used to be the case.
That is gone now. We don't protect one another.
You know what else used to happen? Democrats used to care about protecting First Amendment free speech rights too. Now it's like,
whoa. Oh my God. This is the part I was trying to tell you guys. Like, this is embarrassing for the Democratic Party. It's embarrassing. Again, I want to remind you, Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, they're Democrats. And it's their own party that is treating them this way. How dare you guys try to make Jim Jordan even look somewhat decent? You fail.
Okay, if you're attacking, and I said this on the House floor, I said, don't think they won't come for you. Oh, the big tech, big media, cancel culture, they may come for Republicans and conservatives now, but the mob is never satisfied. They will keep coming. Mr. Schellenberger, you know who the chair of the FTC is?
Not personally.
Lena Khan. Lena Khan, you know who she used to work for?
My understanding is the Judiciary Committee?
Yeah, she's worked for these folks. These same folks have been attacking you today. Same folks. Chair of the FTC, worked for them. Here's what they said. Here's what she said in a letter.
We got to scoot forward. Sorry. This one right here. So they get to the point where they're even going to try to ask them who their sources are. Let me make sure I'm getting to the right part. There we go.
Had unfiltered access to Twitter's internal communications and systems?
Yes.
Would those include HR files?
No. We did not have access to personal information of any kind. In fact, we signed a waiver
Have you produced that waiver to the members of anyone on this committee or any staff?
I'd be happy to produce it. I haven't, but I'd be happy.
Have you given all of the access to what you were given by your source to this committee?
No, I would never do that.
Okay. I didn't ask if you were given the committee, the individuals, but all of the files? No, you have not?
This is the same woman that said he was a so-called journalist.
No.
So what we're getting is your dissemination, your decision as to what was important and not important in that, correct?
Which is true in every news story.
In every story. But you have files that you say you are sharing, but those files are just a smaller period of the files. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. And the FTC investigation of Twitter, you knew that they were investigating Twitter before the time period that Mr. Musk came on?
I was aware of it, yes.
And the FTC was concerned with user data being hacked or used? Is that correct, that they didn't have enough checks and balances on that data?
Well, I wasn't privy to that part.
Have you seen the consent decree?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, the consent decree is concerned with user data, which would be probably the reason that they were concerned if they're giving files to journalists that potentially data about users as well as data about individuals and employees would be given to them.
My understanding
so
is
I
that
didn't
they
ask
didn't
a question. I didn't ask you a question, sir. Okay?
She's a trip. She's another one. They're so nasty and rude.
So do you know that Elon Musk paid $44 billion for Twitter? Is that correct, Mrs. Schellenberger? Were you aware of that?
Yes, I read that.
And did you know that he received that part of the funding from Saudi Arabia as well as Qatar?
Oh, so now you guys have issues with Saudi Arabia because you didn't before.
I heard that.
And did you know that one of those individuals who owns Binance was the company Binance, while he has Canadian citizenship, he is a Chinese national. Were you aware of that?
Oh, you know they had to bring up China. They had to tie it back to China in some way, shape, or form. Let's see how we can demonize China here. I can't make this up.
I did not know that.
Okay, and that he stated that that was for the cause. But thank you very much for answering my questions. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Wyoming for 5 minutes. With the gentlelady, yield for 20 seconds.
All right, there's a couple more I want to get to. Just looking at the time, sorry. We want to go to this woman right here. This is the woman that doesn't know what Substack is. So again, it's like there seemed like there was no preparation for this whatsoever.
I want to follow up a little bit on the ranking member's questions. When was the first time that Mr. Musk approached you about writing the Twitter files?
Again, Congresswoman, that would...
I just need a date, sir.
But I can't give it to you, unfortunately, because this is a question of sourcing, and I don't give up. I'm a journalist. I don't reveal my sources.
It's a question of chronology.
No, that's a question of sourcing.
Because you earlier said that someone had sent you through the internet some message about whether or not you would be interested in some information.
Yes, and I...
So what she's trying to do, what she's asking him is, when did Elon Musk first come to you and ask you to such and such? But by him answering that question, that's giving away a source if he is a source. You see what I'm saying? So that's why he's like, I can't answer that question. So she's trying to, I don't know if she was intentionally trying to trip him up or whatever, but it's like, if he answers that question, that would then point fingers back at Elon Musk as a possible source, which we don't know that. You know, we know this was a project, but we don't know that Elon Musk was an actual source or not. So you have to be very careful.
Refer to that person as a source.
So you're not going to tell us when Musk first approached you?
Again, Congresswoman, you're asking me to, you're asking a journalist to reveal a source.
So then you consider Mr. Musk to be the direct source of all this?
No, now you're trying to get me to say that he is the source. I just can't answer your question.
Well, he is or he isn't. If you're telling me you can't answer because it's your source, well, then that the only logical conclusion is that he is, in fact, your source.
Well,
see, that's what she's trying to trip him up so that he would admit, if it's true or not, I want to be clear here, that he was a source, if he is or not. And that's the thing, like, she's trying to trip him up with that. But my whole thing is like, she knew better. Like, she knows exactly what she's trying to do. And then next thing you know, they're going to have Elon Musk sitting there for a hearing.
You're free to conclude that.
Well, sir, I just don't understand. You can't have it both ways, but let's move on because
no, he can. He's a journalist.
No, he can't, because either Musk is the source and he can't talk about it, or Musk is not the source. And if Musk is not the source, then he can discuss.
No one has yielded. The gentlelady's out of order. You don't get to speak.
She's out of order because he's interrupted.
The gentlelady's not recognized.
You're not recognized.
He has not said that. What he has said is he's not going to.
These are our representatives, you guys. These are the people running Congress. Can you believe this?
To reveal his source, and the fact that Democrats are pressuring him to do so is such a violation.
We're asking him about his conversations with Musk.
The gentlelady has not yielded you time. You don't get
I have
to
not
just talk
yielded
over
time
her.
to anybody. I want to reclaim my time, and I would ask the chairman to give me back some of the time because of the interruption. Mr. Chairman, I'm asking you if you will give me the seconds that I lost.
We will give you that 10 seconds.
Thank you. Now, let's talk about another item that when you responded to the ranking member. You said that you had free license to look at everything, but yet you yourself posted on your I guess it's kind of like a web page. I don't quite understand what Substack is, but
you didn't even take the time to look it up. A quick Google search would explain to you what Substack was. These people aren't even prepared.
That what I can say is that In exchange for the opportunity to cover a unique and explosive story, I had to agree to certain conditions. What were those conditions? She asked you that question, and you said you had none, but you yourself posted that you had conditions.
No, the conditions, as I've explained multiple times.
No, sir, you've not explained. You told her in response to her question that you had no conditions. In fact, you kind of used the word license, that you were free to look at all of them, all 100,000 emails.
The question was posed, was I free to write about?
Sir, did you have any conditions?
The condition was that we published on
Sir, did you
Twitter.
have any conditions, yes or no? A simple question.
He was answering the question. Jesus.
Yes.
All right, could you tell us what conditions those were?
The conditions were an attribution, sources at Twitter, and that we break any news on Twitter.
But you didn't break it on Twitter. Did you send the file that you released today to Twitter first?
Did I send the?
Sir,
actually,
I'm
I did.
you
Yes.
Yeah. Did you send it to Twitter first?
The Twitter
That was
files
one of the
thread?
conditions? Yes or no, sir?
The Twitter files thread actually did come out first.
But sir, you said earlier that you had to attribute all the sources to Twitter first. What you released today, did you send that to Twitter first?
No. I posted it on Twitter.
First, sir. Or did you give it to the ranking member, to the chairman of the committee or the staff of the committee first?
This question, Simone said they want names. This question, I think, if I remember correctly, I think they might have got him on this one, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well, that's not breaking the story. That's giving. Yes, I did give.
So you gave all the information that you did not give to the Democrats. You gave it to the Republicans first. Then you put it on Twitter?
Actually, no. The chronology is a little bit confused.
Well, then
It's more or
tell
less
us
the
what the
same time.
chronology was.
I believe the thread came out first
Where?
on Twitter.
On Twitter. So then you afterwards gave it to the Republicans and not the Democrats?
Yes, because I'm submitting it for the record as my statement.
Did you give it to them in advance?
I gave it to them today.
You gave it to them today, but you still have not given anything to the Democrats. Well, I'll move on, and I wanted to ask.
That's probably because, again, this makes no sense. Again, he's a Democrat. Michael Shellenberger is a Democrat, right? This makes no sense to me. This really doesn't. But I'm assuming it probably wasn't given to the Democrats because they're not the ones who called this hearing. I think Jim Jordan was the one who called this hearing originally. If I'm remembering from my notes, I think Jim Jordan was the one who called it. So it was the Republican side that called the hearing, not the Democrats. That's probably why he only gave it to them. But that question, I think that question right there, I think that one might have tripped him up a little bit, but she was confused herself. She doesn't even know what Substack is.
Mr. Shellenberger, the same question, sir. When did you first visit with or get contacted by Mr. Musk?
I'm not going to reveal my sources, but like I said, I was invited by Barry Weiss.
I'm not asking for sources, sir. I'm just asking for chronology. When did you first make contact with Mr. Musk?
I don't know the exact date.
Was it?
It was December. It was December.
December of, well, there's a lot of Decembers in history.
December of
sir.
last year.
Which December?
December of last year, ma'am.
Last year, the 2022?
Yes.
All right.
No, last year, 2025. See, this is why I couldn't sit there. This is exactly why I could not do this.
Now, in your discussion, in your answer, you also said that you were invited by a friend, Barry Weiss?
My friend Barry Weiss.
So this friend works for Twitter, or what is her?
She's a journalist.
Sir, I didn't ask you a question. I'm now asking Mr. Shellenberger a question. Please
Yes, ma'am. Barry Weiss.
She's so rude. I'm gonna move on to the next person. You can tell no research done. Barry Weiss used to work for the New York Times. Let's go on. Let's go on. Let's go to the next one. We got to do this one before this one right here. We're going to end on this one because this guy, he's going to try to use hate speech and connect it to the Twitter files. And this one really pissed me off. I think I tweeted about this one, right? Yeah, I tweeted about this one. We get to this guy. Okay, here we go.
Oh, I think it's Mr. Allred first.
Oh, I'm sorry. You just walked in, recognize the gentleman from Texas. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter a few tweets into the record.
Sure. Can you identify the tweets?
Let's see it. I think staff should have them. Can we put the tweets up on the screen? Let's take a look at a couple of tweets from Kanye West, who now goes by Ye. At the time of these tweets, had 32 million followers.
Kanye West has nothing to do with the Twitter files. And I can't even, I have to be careful with this one because, yeah, hold on. I'm going to play this with no sound because I got to be careful. But this is the tweet from Kanye that he posted. And I think what upset me by this line of questioning is because this had absolutely nothing to do with the Twitter files. So he's going to try to use this as an example in reference to hate speech or whatever, and whether or not there should be some type of intervention. Listen to this.
Next to it.
I can, yes.
It's a, would you describe it? It's a Star of David, the swastika in the middle of it?
Yes.
Should those tweets have been taken down by Twitter?
I think it's a difficult question. Hate speech is protected in the United States. One of my heroes growing up was the Ukraine-born author Isaac Babel. He gave a speech at the first Soviet Writers' Congress, and he was asked if any important rights had been taken away. And he sarcastically answered, no, the only rights that have been taken away are the right to be wrong. And the crowd laughed, but he was making an important point, which is that in a free country, you can't have freedom without the freedom to be wrong.
Let's move on to a couple of other tweets, not from somebody.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, forget all that. Let's just move on. Simone, he probably pulled muscles reaching for this one. Yes, this one is a big reach. Like, again, I'm just trying to make the connection, and I think this one was a problem.
32 million followers. This one says, Elon now controls Twitter. Unleash the racial slurs, K-word and N-word. The other one says, I can freely express how much I hate N-words now. Thank you, Elon. See, these tweets were taken down.
Again, this has nothing to do with the information that was released from the Twitter files. This has nothing to do with Hunter Biden laptop story being suppressed. They've told to suppress it on Twitter. This has nothing to do with Hamilton 68. This has nothing to do with the removal of Donald Trump from Twitter, which had already been planned before the tweets about last January. I gotta be careful what I say here. Before the tweets about last January. This has nothing to do with that. This has nothing to do with the FBI's involvement, nothing to do with the CIA's involvement, nothing to do with that. Okay? That's what made me mad. Kanye West was not a subject matter. I went through all the Twitter files. Kanye West was not a subject matter. Let's go on.
Even by Elon Musk's Twitter, and they should have been, because they're hate speech. And they lead to real-world reactions. In fact, in the 12 hours after Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, hate speech of all kinds spiked on Twitter, including a 500% increase in the use of the N-word.
What does this have to do with the information that was released in the Twitter files?
And it's not just online. From 2020 to 2021, hate crimes rose almost 44% in major cities. So hate speech online has real impacts in life. And so does election misinformation and propaganda online. Now, Mr. Taibbi, I've read a lot of your work. I respect some of it. But you've cast a lot of doubt on Russian interference in our elections. And today, you have virtually alleged a vast government conspiracy to censor speech.
Cast doubt about what? Russiagate was debunked. We live in a cartoon. We really do.
But I can tell you that the threat to our democracy, I'm not asking you a question. I'll let you know when I do. I can tell you that the threat to our democracy is very real. And it's not just the elections that get all the headlines. In 2018, in a congressional race, two Kremlin-aligned foreign nationals named Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman succeeded in funneling illegal Russian money to a Trump-aligned super PAC that spent $1.3 million to support the Republican candidate. That was my election.
This shit is personal. You see, this is personal for him. I wanted you to hear that, boop, that part right there at the end. It's personal. That's what this is about. And he shouldn't have even been on a part of this committee since he was personally affected. There was a poll question. I hope everyone got a chance to answer the poll. Let's see. Some feel the Twitter files were biased in favor towards the GOP. Do you feel this was intentional? And according to the poll, 18% said yes, 57% said no, and 25% said not sure. That is an interesting mix there.